Okay. All right, welcome. This is our, I believe it's our fourth or maybe fifth high impact conference. And I always try to tie them into the previous one. And today we're going to talk about, discuss rubrics. And I want to link this back into the session that we did together on formative and summative assessment practices. Cindy Kinzer will be assisting with the chat. I'm sure, as you know, it's hard when you're really in the zone, you're facilitating, and then you've got questions coming in the chat. I do encourage you to please post your questions and interact on the chat. That's great. Cindy will pause every once in a while and answer some of the questions. And of course, I highly encourage you, it's boring if it's just me talking. So please, 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 I give you full permission to stop me and with a question, not only a question for me, but for the group. That's how these have worked in the past, the strength of these sessions, and I'm very thankful that everyone is here to participate, that we share what we do. You might see something that I'm discussing that's relevant or that you're doing or you've got a comment on, and these sessions also evolve into other topics, which I think is wonderful. And you know, you've been doing this in the past, or we've talked about one thing and then it's led to a discussion to something else. I encourage that, because I want you to walk away with valuable information that you're going to be using with your students in the classroom and ultimately to help student learning. So let's go ahead and get started. You know, I have to have my learning objectives, and what we're going to learn today, you should be able to define a rubric and know the four components of the analytic rubric. We're going to probably spend more time talking about the analytic rubric today. There are three types of rubrics. You have a single point, you've got your holistic and analytic, but we're going to talk about the holistic and analytic rubrics. And this is going to be enough information for you to go back and hopefully develop your own rubrics, or maybe strengthen what you're doing, or share what you are doing right now with others so they can develop effective rubrics. Kathleen Ben will be joining us a little bit later to discuss rubric development in Brightspace and how you can develop both analytic and holistic rubrics in Brightspace. And the fourth bullet here, in my mind, the most important, sharing best practices. That's what I like to hear the most, is when you share your ideas. Well, I started off with the PowerPoint. I wanted to know where did the word originate, rubric. And so if you're fascinated like me with etymology, and you know, where does that word originate? Well, it comes from red, and was used to refer to, and I'm quoting here, a direction for the conduct of a divine service, inserted in liturgical books and properly printed in red. So you had these sections, you had the in red letters in religious texts, and so and then it evolved over the years, and of course now it's part of our jargon. There's nothing new. We've been working with rubrics for quite some time. But there are ways to develop rubrics to be more effective, and I'll preface that when we think of rubric development, time-consuming, and that's some of the concern that educators have, is I don't have the time to develop an effective rubric. But once you develop a good rubric, and it will help with grading, it will help provide the data that you need. But it dependent upon whether it's an analytic or holistic, which we're going to go in differences, it will require a little bit of time up front and some testing to make sure that it's effective. Why should we consider using rubrics? I'm going to pose that to the group. The experts here, that some of you may use rubrics, develop your own. Why do you use them? How have they, you know, what do you think are some reasons why we should consider using rubrics?
I'd like to jump in.
Please.
Steph. been using rubrics for centuries now. Chris, I don't know if they've been around that long, but I just made that up. But especially in writing intensive courses, it's hard, probably a bit harder to remain objective when you're reading writing, because writing will have subtle nuances that may be redundant here, that you could get drawn into. You might like the student's topic or the
Mhm.
student's tone or something, but then you have to really look at what is it that the student is supposed to accomplish. So for writing assignments, rubrics are a lifesaver because it helps the grader remain objective.
Yep, that's spot on. Thank you. Dr. Everest.
Well, I like them because it creates a consistency where you assess everything consistently without, all the variation. It makes what you're doing clear, makes it clear to the students. And so they don't feel like, maybe the teacher likes this person better than me or something like that, because there's a consistency about it and it's clear and precise.
Right.
So that's why I like it.
Perfect. Thank you. Dr. Leon.
In my case, I think on the rubric, I use it because I wanted the student to know what their expectations are.
Mhm.
So I set out the expectation of the assignment. Sometimes if they don't proficiency in that area, they have to redo in that. That's the case of the BSc program.
That's right. All spot on with your comments. And just as you said here, you're laying out those clear expectations, and that students know in advance what your expectations are. Describing the levels of quality, it helps your instruction, and what students have done or not done. I mean, that's that learning out the learning outcomes, tying your rubrics into your course level and even programmatic learning outcomes. So there is that tie into your EPAs, or if you're doing Gen Ed, well, you got your rubrics in Gen Ed. So all good comments, and some more here. As Dr. Everest, you said that expectations are clear. I think really all three of you said. You got the learning targets there. The feedback. So when students, if you're providing the rubrics back to the students, if they're well designed, it provides that meaningful feedback. It's going to help support your instruction, guides your instruction. You know what you should be covering with the students to help them meet those learning objectives. And as I mentioned earlier, you can use them to provide data, that ordinal level data in those rubrics that can be used to help with your own assessment, your formative and summative assessment strategies. Of course, consistency in grading, and more time for instruction. That you spend the time initially developing these rubrics to spend less time on grading and more time for teaching. And I know that's for a lot of people, especially those that are new to teaching, they think that is a lot of work. These rubrics are too much time. But I would argue that's not always the case. I like this quote from Dr. Durr. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. A well-constructed rubric can help align desired performance outcomes, content, and instruction while also serving as a quick way to provide that meaningful feedback to students. And then I've highlighted here, using rubrics helps instructors identify what needs to be learned as opposed to what needs to be taught. And you're shifting that focus from specific tasks to learning outcomes. I like that quote. I mentioned there's three types of rubrics, and there's holistic, analytic, and single point. We're going to talk about holistic and analytic rubrics, and there's differences between the two, and pros and cons, and I'm sure some of you may use both of them. This is an example of a holistic rubric, and it's the most general kind of rubric. You've got your performance scores here and a description. Usually there's going to be 3 to 5 performance scores. And the main what do you think the main what do you think the main advantage of a holistic rubric is? It's easy to develop. It's easy on the instructor, and at least in the short run. So it's generally easy to develop, less time than the analytic rubric. Professor Andrews, please.
I think that the holistic rubric helps to provide probably some formative assessment,
Mhm.
kind of as students are going along here. There's nothing exceptionally formal about it. You're looking at just this one specific skill to see if the student has mastered it. If not, if you find that your students aren't mastering, you can go back and reapproach that subject and reteach
Mhm.
it. It provides great feedback while you're teaching.
Right, right. You can look over that assignment and you give one holistic score to the whole thing, and you know, so it's you can readily implement that in your class. The disadvantage is it provides good feedback, but it's that targeted feedback that it may not be able to provide like the analytic rubric. And so, you know, easy to develop. And the second bullet, consistent and high reliability. So what that means is, if let's say you're several instructors using the same rubric, and it's generally easy. You've heard me talk about an AQC, inter-rater reliability, and generally with a holistic rubric, you have that consistency and high reliability. It's easy to score. So let's say 4 of us are teaching the same content and we use this rubric. You know, we can align those scores fairly well. But it's that specific feedback for improvement that that the analytic rubric may generally is stronger. But it's great, I think, Beth, as you were saying, that overall achievement on a single trait. So you would have and I would stick with more than 3, and we'll talk about this a bit later, but you have to be careful how many scores. When you start getting over 7, it gets hard to differentiate between what a 6 and a 7 or a 3 and a 4. You don't want 20 scores. This is like with survey development. When I see surveys being developed and they have values going beyond 7, 8, or 9, it's hard for the respondent to differentiate on a scale, a 4 and a 5, or a 6 and a 7. Here's the analytic, the one that I think we're all familiar with. And the analytic rubric, just as I suggested earlier, it's going to provide you know, a lot of meaningful feedback, but it's initially taking the time to develop. You have your performance criteria, performance descriptions, and your performance levels. In this case, only 3, but there's generally a single outcome that it's trying to assess. And these all have to be mutually exclusive, these performance levels. That's probably one of the areas I see, one of the challenges I see with rubric development is they tend not to be mutually exclusive. We'll talk about that in a moment. But that's where the analytic rubrics shine, because they identify those strengths and weaknesses, good data to improve your student learning instruction, but it's that diagnostic feedback where they're the strength. The disadvantage, of course, is that time to create and calibrate. So let's say 5 of us are using the same rubric. You've got a lot more going on in the analytic rubric, and there could be some variations in scores, and you have to spend more time aligning those rubrics. So anytime that you have an instrument, if say you know you're teaching the same class, 4 instructors, same content, highly encourage you to spend some time doing that calibration of the instrument. So you might separately outside of class look at one assignment, one student, or maybe 3 or 4 students, and then all of you assess using the same rubric the same students, and see where there's statistical ways to determine the reliability analysis. But you can just, get together afterwards and say, okay, are we on the same page with those with the scores? And the winner is, well, it depends. I had a statistics teacher and instructor that used to always just say, well, it depends. Well, Dr. Cromery, which tool should I? Well, it depends. Well, this is, you'll hear me say often, put the tools in your toolbox, in your arsenal, and it all depends on what you're trying to do. And so it varies. I can't tell you one is better than the other. But let me stop. Who uses one over the other? Anyone here in particular uses the holistic over the analytic, or a bit of both? I think it all depends.
Chris, in medical assisting for their skills, their actual medical skills before they graduate, we've done a little combination of both because we're testing them and we actually have people come in and pretend to be patients with various diagnoses. And they are judged on, are graded on many things, including giving injections, which of course they don't actually do, but they prepare it. So we use a combination.
Thank you. And I see in the chat, it depends. Jennifer and analytic, Dr. Leon and holistic. Yeah, it all depends. And I like the fact that analytics are easy to create, and there's a lot of good resources, easy to calibrate. But again, just your tools and your toolbox. So developing, because the analytic is generally more complex to develop, we're going to go into the different components of it. And I mentioned earlier that the area that I see some people having challenges with is making sure that these levels are mutually exclusive. But too many levels, too many performance levels. You don't want 12 or 15. How many should we have? More than 3. But when you start getting past 7, it's problematic. It's hard on you and it's hard on the learner. We have our performance criteria, and that's going to be such things like content knowledge, pronunciation, grammar, all dependent upon what content area we're talking about. Your descriptions, I think I mentioned this a little bit later, but one of my pet peeves are double barrel. And you see this in surveys, the ands. Be very careful when you're developing a rubric. And I'm going to tie this into with survey development. If I ask a question in a survey, and it might be, do you believe this and that? Well, I might believe that, but not this. And I see it so often in surveys, and you don't know how to respond. So be careful of those double barrel questions in survey development, or the double barrel prompts, or just performance descriptors in your rubrics. We have our performance levels. This might be, remember, they need to be mutually exclusive and hierarchical. I have some examples here. It could be needs improvement, meets expectations, exceeds expectations. It could be mastery, partial mastery, etc. Below expectations, approaching expectations. But again, mutually exclusive, and they have to be hierarchical. And then our performance levels. So those are the 4 components of your analytic rubric. You have to use the rubric with the students. It means nothing to them if you don't. Students should understand that the rubric is there to help them reflect, self-assess, unpack, critique, and more. Do you share your rubrics with your students? And how do you do that? Any comments or ways you do that? You've integrated that into your instruction?
Chris, in medical assisting, we actually go over the rubric with the students the week before the exam. So if there's any questions, etc., they understand exactly how they'll be graded on that exam, and we go over it.
Thank you. And Professor Grove says she attaches it to the Dropbox. Joan, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I put mine in with the instructions. So if they have instructions in the assignment, then I keep the rubric in there with them. If it's in the discussion board, there's a rubric in there. So it's in several places for them to see. That doesn't necessarily mean they see it, but it is in there for them to review.
Good, good, good. Dr. Schumard.
I typically go over mine. My students know what to expect when we're doing the math problems. And I always pass back the solutions to every problem on the test. So any of them that are not multiple choice, the ones that they can get partial credit on, we actually go over it when I pass back the solutions in case they don't have everything correct on their paper. We go over each step. And it's based on, how many points each problem is worth. That's how I develop the rubric. If the problem's worth 5 points, then it's a 5-point rubric, or if it's 3, I do 3. And I go over step by step with them, and I tell them, you didn't get higher because I loved you more. Here's the deal. If you got to this point, you got a 1. If you got to this point, you got a 2. So I just mainly go over it verbally with them before and after. Mainly, I like to do it after so they can actually see everything they should have done. So that's what I do.
Good. Thank you. And I see in the chat, Professor Severson and Dr. Leon going over them in the beginning of the course and reviewing the rubric with the students multiple times. Professor Andrews.
Oh, yes. I have my rubrics. And first of all, let me ask, is rubrics the correct pronunciation, or is it rubrices for plural? Okay, that's just something that has stymied me. Quality Matters strongly recommends the use of rubrics in our course. So I have mine in multiple places. There are hyperlinks where students can see them. I make a lot of videos for my online classes, and in those videos, I go over the rubrics as well. But my final word to students is, when you have questions or if you're in doubt and you can't get in touch with me, look at the rubric, because that is exactly how I'm going to score.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you. Before Kathleen, you've joined us. Thank you. We're going to go into, we got more after this on rubric development, and Kathleen's going to talk about rubric development, both analytic and holistic, in Brightspace. Dr. Schumard, would you like to, at this point, share?
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you. Thank you. And let me.
Okay, can you see it?
Do I need to stop sharing on my end for people to see your?
I hit
Yes,
share.
Chris, you need to stop, I think, so I can see hers. There we go.
Yep, I'm going to share. Okay. All right, there we go. We sit right next to each other, so his speakers, when they're loud, it does like the reverb thing. So that's what happens.
I'm going to lower the volume down. So,
okay, good. Okay.
Dr. Schumard, please.
So can we all see it now?
Let's see.
Yes.
I know. Okay. I know the middle part is hard. So what I typically do is I take a question.
Can you enlarge it a little bit?
Possibly. Yeah. I don't know.
On the bottom right.
Yeah. Okay. I was hitting it. It just wasn't doing anything for. Okay. Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay. So what I typically do is I take a question like this one's, find the second derivative of the function. And we've already talked about to the kids, like if it's not a multiple choice question, you can get partial credit. And it's going to be based on how far you get. So I've already explained to them. I don't give them the formal copy of the rubric, which I guess it could. But we've talked about it several times when we do the problems. So when I grade their test, I use this rubric, and then when I pass it back, I give them solutions for every single problem on the test. So they have that in their hand. And this is what I use. If it's a 5-point question, and I've got a couple of them here, but if the chain rule is applied correctly, but the answer is not simplified, they get 1 point. And I explained to them that that's the first line. The second, you get 2 points if the chain rule is applied correctly and the answer is simplified. So that means they got through the first derivative. They get 3 points if they use the product rule because they're supposed to take second derivative. And the chain rule applied correctly, but the answer is not simplified or factored correctly. So that would be this line. And they're looking at their paper the whole time to see. They get 4 points if the product and chain rule are applied correctly, and the answer is partially simplified but not factored, because you find that a lot of them will stop here. They'll get part of the way there, and then they don't think about factoring it out. And I remind them, you need to finish it. So then I also show them what they had to factor out, and they get the full 5 points if they get to this part where they get to the final answer. So I just tell them you're going to get points based on how far you get in these longer problems. And I have another one down here. When we're looking for points of inflection on a graph, they also have to do the second derivative. So I give them this problem, and then I have everything worked out on their solutions so that they can see it. And we go down to the rubric. They get 1 point if they did the first derivative correct, but the remainder of the answer is incorrect. So if they only did that, they'll get a point. They get 2 points if they did the first and second derivative correct, but they didn't find their critical values. No concavity is labeled, and the points of inflection are not labeled. So it's really clear, like, okay, this is what I didn't have. That's why I only got 2 points. She didn't see that. They get 3 points if the derivatives are correct and they found their critical values, but they didn't do their concavity or points of inflection. So I tell them they got to here. They get 4 points for the first and second derivatives are correct, but the critical values are identified. So they got 4 points for that. But and the concavity is labeled, but they forgot to do the very last step. It asks for points of inflection. So if they show concavity and they identified everything to here, they get to 4 points. And then of course, 5 points when they finish that final step. They made it all the way to the end and then they completed the problem. So that's just a couple of the ones I use in math. And I do this on the fill in the blank questions. And we talk about it when we're actually learning the process, of course. You're a fourth of the way there, you're a fifth of the way there, you made it 2/4 of the way, that kind of thing. But you got to finish to get your full points. So anytime it's a fill in the blank question, this is the kind of stuff I do. And I only brought a couple, but
that's I'm thinking back from calculus to abstract algebra. I never had a single instructor do this with any of the classes I had, any of the math classes I had. So that's, I'm sure, very effective with the students. That would have been helpful for me.
At least it lets them know, how far did I get? Okay, here's where I messed up. And like I said, I always give them the solutions, even it's multiple choice questions, so they can always go back and look and see how far they got. Because if you don't learn from it, if you just get a grade and move on.
And I like the fact that your engagement with the students with the rubric. How often you're reviewing it with them. And any questions for Dr. Schumart? Comments or questions? And this shows that rubrics can be applied in any subject. It's not just, I'm sure, at least for me, when I think of rubric, maybe because I'm married to an English teacher, I think of one particular subject, and because she reminds me of what she's doing on the weekends with her rubrics. But it can be applied in many, many different content areas. Thank you. Appreciate you sharing that with us. And by the way, Dr. Schumart, abstract algebra, I still have nightmares about abstract algebra. So, Kathleen, ready to share with us some best practices in Brightspace? And I'll make sure to turn our walls are very thin, as she said.
Very thin.
So I'm going to turn the captioning on.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Happy Friday, everyone. Let's see here. There we go. see, share. And let me do this. Oops, but
Well, then why don't we do?
so that's here.
why don't we do
Okay,
this?
so I want to,
Let's just do.
there we go. Okay, and let me,
Whoever can make it, can make it. We'll do it via
Okay.
Zoom.
all right, so here we are. I wanted to show you Brightspace rubrics tool. Most of you are already familiar with it, but I just wanted to go ahead and review this. So let's proceed. In Brightspace, there's two types of rubrics. There's the holistic, which is, as you know, the single one-dimensional one that you can use to base it on activity or an item, predefined achievement levels. The analytical rubric is the two-dimensional one with columns and criteria. And this one is very customizable. You can do different values on different levels, and it's very customizable. It allows you to assess participants' achievements based on multiple criteria using a single rubric. You can even add criteria groups to that one rubric. So it's really nice how they do that in Brightspace. Also, you can add rubrics to your discussions, drop boxes, grade items, and quizzes.
And then.
Now there's 3 rubric status types. The draft is that it's not yet available for new associations, so you can't add that to grade items or anything like that until you publish it. The draft is where you can still make structural changes to the rubric. You can add different levels and that kind of thing. So that's very ready to go. Published is when you cement it in. It's locked in. It's when associations can be made in with published rubrics. Once a rubric has an association, you cannot change the rubric's name, the levels, or criteria. Then there's archived. Archived rubrics do not appear in the default search. Like if you want to add it to an activity, it won't be there. And existing associations with the archived rubrics remain functional. So if it's like a couple semesters ago, that will still show. To assess rubrics, in our Brightspace, you go to your course and under the assessment tab, select rubrics. And so the next screen, I'm going to have a little how to create and edit a rubric. It'll be a video. So let me undo my headphones here because I learned last time I have to have my speaker on for you to hear it. So I'm going to play this video. Okay, let's.
From the organizational homepage, select the desired course using the My Courses widget or the course selector icon at the top right of the page. From your course level navbar, select the Course Tools drop-down menu to access the Rubrics tool. You can also access the Rubrics tool through your course admin link if you do not have the Rubrics tool in the Course Tools dropdown. From the Rubrics tool, click New Rubric. Provide a name for the rubric and choose the desired rubric type and scoring. The analytic rubric type provides the ability to add multiple criteria within a rubric. The holistic rubric type provides a single criterion. Holistic rubrics can also be assessed via percentage scores that are set for each rubric level. The default scoring type of points results in each rubric level having the same score for each criterion. No point values are set when the scoring type is set to no score. The custom point scoring type provides the ability to set unique point values for each level per criterion. Continue on to enter the criterion name, adjust the rubric levels, and adjust the point values. Optionally, additional rubric levels can be added by clicking the plus button, and additional criterion can be added by clicking Add Criterion. Further, rubric levels can be deleted by clicking the Remove Level button. Add a description for each achievement level, if applicable, and add initial feedback that is to be applied when assessing learner work. You may add additional criterion groups in order to create multi-part rubrics by selecting the Add Criterion Group button. Adjust the overall score parameters to define the overall level and score that will be assigned to the learner. Set the rubric options that include rubric visibility, score visibility, description, and advanced availability. Click Close to finish creating your rubric. Edit a rubric by choosing Edit within the drop-down menu beside the desired rubric name. Please note, rubrics that have been used to assess learner work cannot be edited. Use Copy to create and edit a new version of the rubric.
Okay, that's that. And then we go next. Oops, whoops, there we go. Okay, so some notes. Now, with our newest update, we can go and edit the text fields in assessed rubrics. So that means like if you made a spelling error or you just wanted to do a different wording on that, you can actually go into assessed rubrics and change just the text fields. So you can't make any structural change, but like I said, you can clarify, you can change, you know, if you have a spelling error or something like that. Okay. Previous evaluations are not affected by changing the status of the rubric to archived, and archived rubrics are not available to attach to new activities. And I do have another video on how to create a holistic rubric, which is basically almost the same. Ooh, let me stop that. It's almost the same as the other one, but it's a little different. So I'll go ahead and play that for you.
Rubrics to evaluate learners based on a single criterion. This tutorial shows how to create a holistic rubric. To begin, from Rubrics, click New Rubric. Enter a name for your rubric. Rubrics auto-saves your changes. Change the status of your rubric if necessary. For this example, keep the default published. To make your rubric holistic, click the rubric type menu and select Holistic. Select your scoring method. Scoring methods include no score or percentages. In this example, we will use the default percentages method. You can reverse the order in which the levels display. Add new levels using add new level before or add new level after, respectively, at any time. To remove a level, click Delete Level. Edit the level titles. Next, update the level percentages and add details to inform learners how to achieve each level of the rubric. When adding rubric details, you will be able to include basic HTML markup, such as bold, italics, and unordered lists. Navigate to initial feedback. Next, add initial feedback if desired. Then, confirm additional rubric options. Update the rubric visibility if necessary. Select Hide Scores from Students to hide students' points value if you use a different grade scheme. Enter a description for the rubric for your personal reference. Edit Advanced Availability to change associations with competencies and ePortfolio. When you are ready, click Close. Your rubric displays. And use holistic rubrics to evaluate learners based on a single criterion.
Okay, and that's the holistic rubric. And then just a little bit about best practices. Okay, for the rubrics, make sure that the language from column to column is similar and that the syntax and wording correspond. Use student-friendly language. And as many of you do, use the rubric with your students. Everybody usually does that. And don't use too many columns, because if it gets too big, then it's kind of hard for the students to get there. Common rubrics and templates work well, which we kind of do that with our Gen Ed rubrics. And then rely on descriptive language. So that's just a few of the best practices. And then also one little thing is to use the feedback. You can make use of the automated feedback. When creating a Brightspace rubric, you can provide feedback for each criterion and performance level on the rubric. So now when you use the rubric, students will be able to see how you scored them and view the feedback associated with that score. And also you can tie more than one rubric to an activity. So you could have like a holistic rubric with an analytical rubric on the same activity. And let's go further. When you're evaluating a Dropbox submission, this is when you're grading a Dropbox and it has a rubric, you'll see it there listed. And you have this little one, which is a pop out, and this arrow expands it. So if you click on the expand, this is where you can simply grade your rubric right here inside the evaluation. And at the end, it totals it and puts its overall grade over here. And that's where you would click publish. If you use the little pop-out window, this is the view you get. And you can also go ahead and assess from there. The students will see this in their Dropbox. They'll see feedback unread. When they click on that, once opened, the rubric will show and they'll see how they were graded. This is where that feedback could come in there and they could see that also. Oops, let me go back one. Okay, so we use Brightspace rubrics to assess our gen ed statistics there, our gen ed learning outcomes. And please note that rubric grades do not transfer to the gradebook in inactive courses. So this is, I find this out when I do gen ed statistics. Sometimes like if people just will do it after the semester closed, when that happens, then the grades won't transfer. So that's just something to look at. And you can also use your rubrics to evaluate your students to see if they meet their course learning objectives. And then I have another little subject that's kind of off topic, but it's in the news. So let me go and see this, Turnitin. IA writing and chat GPT, they're developing detection capabilities. So as IA writing tools are developing at a rapid pace, and so is Turnitin's technology to detect these emerging forms of misconduct. Turnitin has technology that can detect AI-assisted writing and AI writing generated by tools such as Chat GPT. So they want to give you a little firsthand glimpse of what their technology can do. So there's a little video from the developer of this new tool to detect the AI. Let me see the best way to do it. It's pretty small here. I'm going to go ahead and click on it, but I think I might have to share a different screen with you guys because it's kind of small, but let's see.
Hi, folks. My name is David Adamson. I am an AI scientist at Turnitin, and I'm also a former high school teacher. So I'm here today wearing both hats to talk to you about Turnitin's current efforts at AI writing detection. So ChatGPT and its cousins are here. It's going to be transformative. Perhaps it will be the graphing calculator of the language arts. You're going to want to be able to say, hey, student, this is the appropriate time to use this kind of supporting tool. This definitely isn't. And in order to do that, you'll want to have confidence about when they're using it and when they're not. So our detector, tuned for academic writing, is in the works. We hope to share it with you in some product form soon. Here's a peek. So again, I am not the user experience designer for the fund.
Are you guys able to see that? Okay. With that, I'll keep on going.
I'm just the man behind the curtain. It's just a quick demo. Here's an example about etymology of the word thing. Yeah. In fact, it did indeed all come from ChatGPT, and we can say, hey, 24 of these sentences out of all 24 came from ChatGPT. But here's a more interesting example. Here is a story written in the style of Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes stories. I've made some edits to. Parts of it I liked, parts of it I felt were a bit simplistic, so I went in and I added some more text, a little more narrative to the middle. I left a bit of the end alone as well. Can our detector tell us which parts were AI written and which parts were David written? Well, I sure hope so, because that's the point of this demo. Oh, good. Yeah, about half this essay, half this story was AI written. The beginning was left alone. Here's the part I changed. We're not quite sure, so we won't say much about the parts where it might be transitioning between human writing and AI writing. It's a fuzzy boundary. You don't want to do any harm by saying the wrong thing. And we transition back out of the AI writing into some more human writing and end with a few sentences from the machine. So that's what we hope to be able to share with you in some form, not just a single magic number, but a bit of context when we're all done. So you can have these conversations with your colleagues and with your students. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so I just wanted to share that with you. And as he said, this is from Turnitin, that as you see in the video, our technology is far along in the progress, but we still have work to do before the solution can be customer ready. So I just want to let you know that I will keep up to date on that and keep you guys posted as far as when we can get that in our Turnitin deal. Okay, so any questions about rubrics or the new Turnitin product? Okay, if you need any help with rubrics, like I said, send it over to Brightspace support. We'll help you develop the rubric or help you do anything with it. All right, thank you. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you. That was helpful. Any questions for Kathleen? How many of you, when you started off teaching, thought you'd have to worry about AI writing papers and having to detect that?
That's interesting. I just saw a news thing on TV yesterday about that, and it's so interesting that then she brought that up today about that chat GPT.
We have been talking about it in freshman English 1. And then like you, Lori, I saw something on the news about it the other night. I think that it's going to have to be addressed probably at division levels, how each division wants to handle that. And it's probably going to need to be addressed in our syllabi, our student handbooks. It's here to stay, I'm afraid. But so, you know, we can't ignore it.
No.
And when Kathleen, we were going over her presentation, and I know we kind of snuck that in there, but I felt it was, with many of you's turn, it affects really all disciplines, even math. I mean, you'll have even math. It affects all disciplines. And Beth, as you were saying, is this something that you're going to have to eventually? It's going to be weaved into syllabi and discussions with your students. It's just, yeah, brave new world.
Abby shared with me this morning where you can even, there's this new system that you can type in artwork, like, you know, I want an impressionist of a blue dog, and it develops this artwork for you. So it is crazy what this computer stuff can do now.
I see heads shaking, and yeah, it's anyways, thank you, Kathleen. Dr. Evers, please.
This is just a little off topic, but when you were listening to that video from, Bright Space, and she was going, did anybody get that 2001 Space Odyssey vibe?
Great movie.
You know, it just, the tenor, the pacing of it and everything, I just kind of went, oh, it's Hal speaking. But anyway, I was just saying, maybe
I'm sorry,
that was
Dr.
AI,
Evers, I can't allow
AI
that.
generated. That's like a flashback. No, it's all right.
That was my my HAL 2000 impression. Yeah, you're right. Well, thank you. Let me. If anyone would like to share how they're using any best practices with Brightspace and the rubric development tools, I'd love to know how many use this. We'll consider using it. Any thoughts before we move on? Would like to share with the group?
I promised that this was going to be my last comment about 3 comments ago here, but no one else is jumping in, so I will. I use rubrics everywhere. I do. I have for years and years. I learned about rubrics actually taking ESOL courses through the Highlands County School Board, along with some of your wife's friends. We were in a cohort together, and I remember the instructor telling us that we needed to become rubricators. And they are really can be challenging to create, but once you create them, they do make your thinking more organized. They relay the information more clearly to students. There are very few assignments that I have that don't require the use of a rubric. I use them constantly. And it's not just English, as you said, it's not just writing intensive courses. They're applicable across the spectrum. I can't imagine my courses without rubrics. I would not want to teach. I would have to retire.
Thank you. And please keep commenting. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see the next my slide. And as Professor Andrews was saying, that the particularly the analytic rubric, it gives students that a clear picture of why they got the score they got, and it's good for you because it can justify. And I think this is what Dr. Evers was saying earlier, or several others, but justify that score on paper or electronically without, you can justify it, but also the advantage of you don't have to then explain it in a later conversation. It's there. Not that we of course want to encourage engagement with the students, but it helps that with that conversation. And I'm going to give you the good, bad, and the ugly, and I've talked about it before. The analytic rubrics, creating them takes a lot of time, but it's worth it. But it goes into the best practices when you have the 3 to 5 columns, as Kathleen was saying, and I've mentioned earlier. That's enough of a challenge on its. I mean, that art in itself is a challenge, but when you start adding 7, 8, 9 columns, then you've got to come up with different performance descriptors for each one of those columns. So now you've got a 36 cell table with a lot of descriptors in there, and it's not valuable for the instructor, and it's not valuable for the learner. So keep them simple. Keep them simple. And okay, can everyone see the designing your rubric slide? Is that what you're seeing? No? Okay, thank you. Let me try again. How about now? Okay, perfect. Got thumbs up. Thank you for letting me know in the chat. So let's go into, and I'm going to focus just on the analytic rubrics at this point, but the designing your rubric, and I'll show this in another slide with an actual rubric so we can, a little easier to follow visually. But my recommendation is you first start reviewing your learning outcomes. I know you do that already, but start looking at your course level program, whatever you have as your student learning outcomes. What is it you want to assess with the rubric? So the knowledge and skills, and again, they can be applied to multiple areas, and it's not just in arts and sciences, applied sciences, nursing, any area. It goes back to our learning outcomes. What should the student be able to know, do, perform, etc. Then you start with the observable criteria. That's on that left-hand side, the knowledge and skills. You've got to break down that criteria into levels of performance. That's why I say keep it simple. And then you have to describe those characteristics for each performance criteria. So those are the 4 components. Knowledge and skills, review your student learning outcomes, course level outcomes, it could even be program level outcomes. You have your criteria. Again, keep it simple. These should all be related to the knowledge and skills you're trying to assess. So you want these to be in alignment. And the levels, preferably, I like 3 to 5. When I said earlier, when you get over 7, 8, or 9, it becomes, because now you've got 3 columns, you've got multiple columns, multiple rows, and you have to then come up with these performance descriptors. It's tough. I mean, you saw Dr. Schumard's. Imagine if Dr. Schumard, you had 10 levels, and you had to. It's no value to the student. And then dividing, like I said, dividing those levels into performance. I recommend work with your colleagues, particularly if they're teaching the same subject, to ensure that get feedback on the rubric and to align it. So if you're doing if you're working with, say, part-time instructors, I'm not sure if you're sharing your rubrics with others, but definitely take an opportunity to align it. Does anyone do that with other instructors teaching the same subject content and using the same rubric? Have you aligned your rubrics together? Because it can reveal quite a bit. You'll find out, oh, this is what I thought that meant. And they should generally be very close on the scores. We did that with for those on the EPA review. We did our inter-rater reliability, and that's a chance to really ask questions and get some good feedback on the rubric. And here's some considerations. Avoid negative language, and I've seen this before. And for example, in the in the descriptor, things like student failed to do this, or that type of language. Just try to keep it positive. That's generally the recommendations for best practice, and how would the learner interpret those descriptors? Many of you providing students with copies of rubric in advance. I love that, and great strategies for doing that, whether it's in through Brightspace or discussing it in the class. Multiple ways of discussing it with the students. That friendly language, Kathleen mentioned that. So remember the audience that's reading the rubric. Does it make sense to them? Might make sense to you, but does it make sense to them? Acronyms, do they? And that's why getting feedback from other instructors, and even feedback from the students. Were these helpful? Did it help you? I mentioned before my pet peeve, the double barrel performance indicators. You can't have and statements in there. That's okay. And we looked at Dr. Schumart's. That was there. I didn't see anything where you had that double barreled problem. But when you're writing them, could for one particular performance descriptor, could they be a 4 or a 1 in the same descriptor? That's what I'm getting at with that double barrel performance indicator. Make sure your performance levels are progressive. I mentioned several times mutually exclusive. So you don't want to be using the same descriptor for a different level. And too many point values. With surveys, the same thing. When I see scales over 9 points, I'm like, okay, what does a 7 or a 6 mean? What is an 8 or a 9? It gets muddied. And the problem with too many performance levels, too few, is not enough data. You don't get that variability. If you only have two performance levels, are you getting enough variability to help you determine if you're covering the subject appropriately or the student's learning? And too many levels, as I said several times, you can't delineate that performance. What does a 4 or 5 mean? And then, God, the challenge of having to come up with different descriptors for 9 levels on just one row. So how many levels should be used? In honor of Dr. Cromery, it depends. But Chris Vanderkay is going to say, when you get over 7, 6 or 7, it gets problematic. I like to, 3 to 5. And then inter-rater reliability. I encourage you to work with colleagues, work with others to, particularly in the same subject, to make sure that you're using the rubrics the same way. You're coming up with the same scores. That inter-rater reliability. You don't need to do complex statistics. And if you need help, if you want complex statistics, certainly reach out to me. I'd be happy to sit down with you, and we can come up with some strategies on aligning rubrics and using data to come up with some neat coefficients that can help you quantify the reliability of the instrument. And here's an example. I scoured for a good example of an analytic rubric, and there are many examples, but you have all the components here. They're mutually exclusive, not too many levels. I don't see in here that lacked any mention. You look at the language, is it using any negative language? So I'm going to put this up. What are your thoughts on this rubric? What are your
Chris, we have a comment in the chat. Excuse me. We have a comment in the chat.
Please.
Beth Andrews is the humanities department uses a common rubric for final research papers.
Okay. And I'm sure that provides a good opportunity to, I'm sure you discuss the rubric collectively, and it's a good reflective tool for the instructors as well, correct?
Yes, indeed. And it helps with our adjuncts as well. So we have spent many years developing and using the rubric and altering it as necessary.
Thank you. Dr. Everest.
Well, I was just going to kind of say, the lacked word, that's a nicer word than failed to provide or something like that. So it's
Sure.
it's at least nicer.
Any other thoughts, things you would adjust or change? What don't you like? It does require a lot of work, and getting another set of eyes on it, and that's why I encourage. Same thing with editing a paper. You know that I'm amazed. I write something and then I give it to someone else, and they see things that I didn't. So let me stop the screen sharing here, and I like to take something as simple, like we did with formative and summative assessment, a simple concept that I know we've talked about before, but provide us opportunity in these sessions to reinforce, and like in our learning objectives, you're going to walk away today, and even if you say, boy, now I know the difference between analytic and holistic rubric. Even if you go back and apply it, and maybe you're not using it in Brightspace, or maybe you've come up with a little nugget of information, I consider that a successful session. So it's 10:04. The session is for 2 hours, but I like to give enough time for questions or comments, even if it's quasi or not related to what we've talked about, but related to instruction. This is the forum that it's high impact, so I certainly would encourage that. And also some thoughts on what you would like to see next time. We've talked about formative and summative assessments. We've done different sessions where it's been focus groups, and we've looked at EPAs and gen ed, ways we've applied our data in the classroom to improve student learning. So I'm going to open up to the group. So 2 things. Is there anything else you'd like to use this time to discuss, whether related to the session or not? And what would you like to see next time?
Chris, it's Roger Smith.
Yes.
I wanted to go back to the chat GDP conversation. My phone blinked out there for about 3 minutes. And when
Please.
I came back, you guys were wrapping that. Just a question on that. I have been obviously exploring that, as many other people, for the issues it's going to present us. Is our institution, and if this is covered, I'm sorry, but is our institution beginning to explore what everybody else is exploring for are we institutionally, are we anywhere there other than just talking about it's a problem?
I'll admit this is maybe because my sphere is a little bit different. This is relatively new to me. So that's why I felt it was important and you're referring to the AI, important being brought up in today's session. So I'll just to the group, if anyone else wants to add.
Okay, perhaps I should say, let me restate for a moment. This is obviously the biggest obstacle to original work that is not verifiable for any discussion board under 500 words in 12 seconds. It is obviously a significant problem in the content that we're covering, because it's so readily available, and we're looking for that critical thinking and integration. I guess, as from an institutional perspective, I've had a couple conversations with some faculty in different organizations, and it's kind of, I feel like they're in the same boat we are, which is, yeah, this is a problem. Are there anything that our institution would recommend that we should be doing as faculty members to either increase the reliability that the things that we're reading are originally produced, or are we literally just tabling this and the kids that are doing it today, and there are many in our institution, are just getting away with it? As an instructor, I'm just evaluating the product there.
Sure. Professor Devane and then Professor Everest, please.
Well, I just wanted to mention Michelle Macbeth has been doing a lot of research on this, and She and I have had some very good conversations about it. So I feel Michelle Macbeth does know quite a bit about this, and she and I have discussed that, you know, maintaining our Turnitin.com subscription is super important. And I know Turnitin, as we saw in the video, and then based on our other research, is trying to develop software to just combat this as best they can. A lot of universities and colleges have like banned the use of the chat, but a lot of the other universities are like, hey, well, you know, how are we going to enforce the ban? And well, you know, it would just be a mess. So the research that I've read talked about trying to structure our assignments so that it is more reflective of the students' personal experiences, which I know you already do a lot of, Roger, so that it's, you know, if you say analyze Pride and Prejudice or whatever, well, that's an easy one for the chat box deal. But we're, you know, it's more difficult for us, but we need to try to create assignments that they're less likely to use the chat bot on. You know, it really bothered me because, you know, the article I was reading about it in New York Times, even multiple choice exams, the chat bot will look up the answers and tells you which answer to put. So it's more than just writing a paper or writing a discussion board. I mean, it'll even do the multiple choice exams for the students. So I agree with you, Roger. This is going to be huge. And when I see these kind of things, I'm like, Beth, I'm like, maybe I'm just getting too old for this stuff and I need to retire, because it is, you know, bigger picture. I worry about our students, and as they grow, their ability to critically think and their ability to be creative, because they're so reliant on this AI. And I mean, big picture, it's very, I'm very concerned just about, because part of what we do is teach kids to think and teach kids to look at things from other perspectives. And these chatbots don't allow for any of that. So I am very concerned, but the only thing we've come up with so far is, you know, we're going to stay strong with our Turnitin.com, and we're going to have to probably buy add-ons to combat the AI, and then trying to structure our assignments so that we're sort of forcing the students to write about personal experiences. Thank you for allowing me the time to share.
Thank you. Let's Professor Andrews, Professor Jacquez, and then Professor Everest.
Michelle, thank you so much for that. I did see on a news broadcast that very same concept, that institutions are trying to make assignments more reflective of students. In English 1 in particular, we teach students how to research, to find accurate information. And when I saw this broadcast, and Michelle Macbeth certainly has been going over it with us, I felt like I was being shot in the kneecaps. So I was very much appreciative of Kathleen sharing that demo from QM, or I'm sorry, from Turnitin. The Turnitin is already aware of this and is working to help minimize the effects for us.
Thank you. Professor Jacquez?
Wanting to tag on to what Michelle said, being concerned about where the future of our students are going, not wanting to sound like one of those crazy people talking about the future of sci-fi and AI taking over the world. But I mean, this is how you kind of see it starting to take place. It takes away that whole critical thinking aspect. if people rely so much on it, and it's, I find myself as well, you're watching a movie and you're trying to think of what's the name of that person that was in that movie. And my first response is to pick up the phone and look at Google. And then you think, it's happening to everybody across the way. So, being only 4 years away from retirement, I think about it, even just our own school, how many of us are that close to retirement? And then you think about pretty soon there's going to be a whole new wave of professors at our school. And then what they're going to have to deal with in this whole thing with Chat GPT and the AI. And I just, you have to be concerned for what's going to be happening in the next 20 years in higher education. And that's, I'll get off my soapbox now. It's a little scary.
I see heads nodding. Thank you. Dr. Everest.
Everybody has made such great comments on this, and I'll be honest, I haven't given this a lot of thought yet. But one of the things that we could do, because we have this capacity in Brightspace, is like for discussion boards or something like that, maybe they could just provide an audio feed rather than a written feed, or something like that. And I know that this creates the idea that certain kinds of like cheating or whatever can really, this is like a multiplier factor of this. But I have learned for over the last 30 years or whatever it is, most students are too lazy to cheat. I went from having, monitored exams to them doing them online at home, where I know that they can have access to like the textbook chapters and my lecture notes, because I give them all that stuff. And their scores haven't gone up that much. I mean, they really haven't. And I'm kind of always stunned. It's like, you've got a document that has every answer to every question, and they can't be bothered to look at it. So I think just the more engaging we are with them, the more they're going to, respond to what you got, what you want them to learn and think about and create and whatnot. I think that almost using some of this technology and stuff is almost more trouble than they want to go to. Now I can see students like in law school, this is going to be a huge problem, or something like that. But I don't think it's going to be. And I'm not sure about the English department with papers and research papers. That might be a different thing. But on our day-to-day stuff, I doubt this is going to be a huge factor. That's just my thought.
Yeah. Dr. Smith, anything you want to say further?
I actually appreciated two parts of that. I appreciate what Marcy just said. I hope that ends up being the case, that it's too much work to cheat. I appreciate the personalization of the assignments. I think that is a fairly good strategy for the content that I am covering. For sure. I mean, I don't know what else you do there. It's the tough part. It is the tough part of grading, particularly if you don't know if it's their work. But I like those two things. I like what everybody said there. I think it's an issue we should keep pretty high on our radar for academic integrity. I guess that's probably where I'll leave that.
Yeah, it touches all subjects, and yeah, Dr. Everest, what you said, I hate to bring up my wife again, but I hear her stories and how often she has to remind you have all this information at your fingertips. You can look up anything you want. And reflecting on my own education, all of us, pre-internet, how difficult it was to get information. Even the Lori, as you said, with the name of an actor, when my daughter, so how did you get information? I said, I was frustrated a lot because I was calling people up for that name of that actor that just drove. So I'd call 5 people, but are they going to take the time? And if they're not using what's available right now, And it's, I think of this is why we can't have nice toys. So we're going to go back to them having to write papers in front of you or do their problems in front of you, and face to face. I don't know, but I'm glad this was brought up. This is what I like about these sessions, that they evolve and lead to other topics. And I will bring this up at Monday's Dean's meeting, and we'll talk about it collectively. I don't see Dr. Hawker here, but we'll talk about it. And it's good to know that it's being discussed in faculty council, and this will go further. Any other comments? Rubrics or AI? So do you have any thoughts on what you would like to see next time? If not, I don't want to put you on the spot. We can always talk about it later. But if there's anything right now that you would like to offer suggestions, or we can talk about it later time. Dr. Everest.
I know we're going to have a session on this at Professional Development Day, but I'd love it if Kathleen could come and show us some of the new HTML options for Brightspace, or some stuff like that, and just see what we could do in Brightspace in and of itself.
Okay, that's good. I see a thumbs up. Any other suggestions, comments? Okay. Emily, I'm going to put you on the spot a little. We have Emily DeBolt here, and I think many of you know Emily, as she there she is. She's doing a lot of good work on the QEP, Panther Pathways, and she kindly joined us to. It helps her learn what to engage with faculty and help learn what your needs are and how we can align the QEP to both the students and learners. So, Emily, is there anything you want to say? Again, I'm putting you on the spot. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I've loved all these conversations. And I don't feel like I have a seat at the table to even contribute. But I love all these conversations today, especially about the academic integrity with the AI. That is new to me. Although I have a senior in high school, so I see some of this happening in writing papers. So it is very real, and it is happening in K-12, and it is definitely happening on college and university campuses, only because I have older children and I'm seeing it as a parent. So I think it's something we have to be ready for. And I love I'm not sure who made the comment about the engaging maybe with videos as opposed to discussion boards, having students record themselves and then post their little blog to make them have that authentic conversation and have just that more engaging talk as opposed to writing it out. It really makes them have that critical thinking, and that's what it's all about. I love that. As far as the QEP, and I know I think a lot of you have seen me working with the grant, Heartland Pathways grant. It's all about that best practices, best teaching, best learning. And this discussion you guys are having today is all about that. And I think as far as the QEP is concerned, the whole idea around Panther Pathways is, yes, helping the students to guide them with these pathways, but it's bigger than a roadmap. It is the wraparound service of advising and mentoring and all of this best teaching that you guys are talking about today with the rubrics. I'm coming from K-12. If we used rubrics in the Highlands County School Board, we were highly effective teachers. Using a rubric got away from the low-level thinking, and that rubric in place is what's going to produce quality instruction because it forces critical thinking. So today was just great for me to be a part of, and I thank you. And I'm here if anyone has any concerns or questions. I want to be available to everyone on this campus. The QEP touches every single spot of this campus. It is all encompassing as far as helping our students be successful and attracting students to come to our campus. So I want to be that for you guys. I'm an educator at heart, so I'm kind of a little unique piece in that I have been in the classroom for the last 12 years, and now I'm looking at it from both sides. So I'm here for all of you. What can I do to help you make your online instruction stronger? I know we have heard this word high flex. What does that mean? And hybrid. I know you've seen some different things coming out of maybe with Joanne, with QM. Anything that I can do to help you have better teaching practices as far as any of your courses are concerned online. Shoot me an email, call me, come by my office. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Emily. Dr. Everest and I think Cindy, you had a question, but Dr. Everest, please. You had a question on the high flex.
Yeah, just Emily, can you give us an update on where we're at on getting some of the equipment that we thought we could use to enrich our online classes and stuff like that?
Sure. Dr. Everest, are you specifically talking about the classroom equipment or what you might need in your office to help you?
Well, I'm kind of wondering, my next step is waiting for the double screen so that I can do, face-to-face real-time discussions with online students. So that was
so like the double monitors.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is just, I was really just waiting on to see what other, if you were the only one that has replied to me as far, there was one other person that needed one other thing. So I can get that moving for you today. I was really waiting to see, I would love to do kind of a bulk order, but I haven't really had many folks reach out. Even when you guys were talking about grading rubrics, when you're sitting in your offices or you're at home and you're using a rubric to grade, are you having to split your screen on a laptop? Are you using two different monitors? As a teacher, when I would have to split my screen, if I'm using a rubric, I also had to have students paper up at the same time. Are you guys, do you have what you need when you're actually using a rubric? Because it's very
Emily, let's you and I get together on Monday and create another outgoing email to everybody and kind of lay it out and talk about, so that because I'm sure there are other people who would like to do this, but somehow it's kind of slipped through the cracks somewhere.
Yeah, that would be great, Dr. Everest. I'm here all day on Monday, so that would be fabulous. And it would be anything from, do you have the double screens, speakers, a headset? Do you have the pieces, a good webcam when you're teaching online?
Well, and we may need new computers because I don't know that the laptops we have dual video outputs. So we're going to have to get a little input from IT on that for sure.
Oh, as far as attaching your two screens?
Yeah.
So you can attach your laptop if you just USB to your two screens. It should be able to do that.
Well, this is tech information that this Luddite does not understand. So you can explain that to me then. That'd be great.
Okay. Yes, let's chat. Absolutely. That would be fabulous.
Okay. Thank you. And that might be if the laptops have an HDMI output and they have a VGA monitor, I'd let IT speak for that, but that's just something that I was thinking about. See, these conversations evolve, and I love it. So it's 10:30, kind of wrapping up, but anything before we close out? Emily, thank you for that.
You're welcome. Is Mary Ann have her hand up?
Oh, did I miss somebody?
I think I see that.
Was there another hand up?
Might have been old.
Okay. And Emily, I mentioned earlier that you mentioned earlier that your involvement with the Heartland Pathways to Success. So a lot of the funding that's supporting our QM initiative, you don't know already, is coming from that Heartland Pathways to Success project. So Emily's been working closely with Joanne and others on our QM initiatives. Thank you.
Yeah. So if any of you want to take any kind of improving your online course, any of the courses available through QM, as long as this grant is available, I can fund that for you. There are so many different things, professional development opportunities on QM that are fabulous, that you're welcome to register. Shoot me an email. So many they have a lot of resources available through QM. And we've got some upcoming things with a group, some instructional designers that you're going to hear about real soon. In March, they're going to come for Professional Development Day to help with instructional design for your courses, which I think is going to be just a huge turning point. And I know Dr. Efrest, I think you were a part of that initial call, but I think that's going to be a great resource. There's going to be a seminar available where you will get to learn a lot about instructional design practices to help you in Brightspace, designing your courses and how to make them better, best, high quality.
Thank you, Emily. Appreciate your time. I enjoyed. I consider it an honor that you'd want to listen to me for an hour and a half talk. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and ideas. I always love doing these sessions because as I said several times, the conversations that come up always engaging. And so thank you for your time. Dr. Schumart, thank you for your willingness to volunteer, sharing your information. We're going to do it again next year. And so we're going to keep this moving forward. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I will get a PowerPoint. We're going to post this again, the video on Panther Central, and it will be in the EdTech area where the previous sessions are listed there. Joanne works with Melissa Cunley. They get it converted to a YouTube and it'll be posted there. And if you'd like my PowerPoint, I can send it out to you or have Joanne post it. Either way, I'll make sure you get it. Cindy, did you want any closing thoughts before we?
I think it'd be a great idea if you could send the PowerPoint out. I found it very helpful and interesting. So for me, it would be great if you could send that out. And it was a wonderful session. And thanks everyone for participating today. Chris, you did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yes, Professor Supel.
Well, since we're all here together and we've talked about rubrics, if everybody has not done their Gen Ed reporting from fall semester, now would be a really nice time to get that done.
Very relevant.
Yes, please.
I see applause. Yes, that would be, we've got our Gen Ed, we'll be sharing Gen Ed information coming up very soon in a couple months. And as you know, I compile that data and Peggy used that for the EPAs for AA. And of course, Dr. Everest, you have your leadership. And so very important. Let us know how we can help with that. Kathleen also works individually with faculty members if they need any assistance with the rubrics in Brightspace. So thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much. Please take care.